Level 4, the most difficult problems, it's when you have a double radical problem. Take a look at problem 5. You see how you have two separate radicals? What you want to do is you want to solve or isolate the more difficult radical. So you see this one? This is the one we want to get by itself. Get that one by itself, which means this one moves over. So step 1, we're going to get the square root of 2x plus 1 equals the positive square root of x now when you move it over, plus 1. Step 2, we're going to square both sides. And this is where people are going to make their mistake. If you square this side, you just get 2x plus 1. But when you square this side over here, it's a binomial that you're squaring. So you're going to have to write it twice. And that's where a lot of people are going to make their mistake, is they're not going to write it twice. They're just going to write x plus 1 instead of actually foiling it through. So step 3 is to multiply it through. And that's going to give you 2x plus 1 equals, now you have to FOIL. And all of this is coming together from all of chapter 6. So the square root of x times the square root of x is the square root of x squared, or just x. The outside times the outside gives you the square root of x, as does the inside times the inside. 1 times 1 is just 1. That's going to give you 2x plus 1 equals x plus, there's 1, 2 square roots of x plus 1. And this skill came from chapter 6. Okay, now look at this step. You still have, write this down, you still have a square root. So you need to isolate the square root. So see this thing that I'm underlining? We need to isolate it. So I'm going to do minus 1 minus x minus 1 minus x to both sides to move it over. Okay? So that's going to give me 1x plus nothing equals 2 square roots of x. Now what I'm going to do, step 4, I'm going to isolate, or excuse me, I've already isolated it. I'm going to square both sides. So I get x squared equals 4x. Now step 5, you have an x squared, okay, set it equal to 0. So you do x squared minus 4x equals 0. Now in step 6, you need to factor or use the quadratic formula. I'm going to factor. It's going to be much easier if I just pull out an x, and it's going to be x minus 4 equals 0. Step 7, we're almost done. Step 7, I'm going to set each one equal to 0. So the first thing equals 0, and the second thing equals 0. This one's already done. This one becomes x equals 4 when you add it to the other side. Okay, now I need to do a quick check to make sure they both work. Let's try 0 first. That's the square root of 2 times 0 plus 1 minus the square root of 0, and we need to see if that equals 1. That's the square root of 1 minus the square root of 0. Does that equal 1? Yes. 0 is a solution. Now let's check 4. That's square root of 2 times 4 plus 1 minus the square root of 4 equals 1. Let's see if that's true. That's the square root of 9 minus the square root of 4 equal 1. Let's see if that's true. 3 minus 2 equal 1. That also checks in. One more problem like that and we'll be all done. Circle the more difficult radical and isolate that. So step 1, get the more difficult radical by itself. That becomes a positive square root of x when you move it to the other side. Step 2, square both sides. That gives you 5x plus 4 on the right, but on the left, be careful, because it's going to be x square root of x plus 4 times the square root of x plus 4. Step 3, multiply things through. So I get 5x plus 4 equals, now FOIL over here. The square root of x times the square root of x is just x plus 4 square roots of x plus 4 square roots of x. That comes from the outside and the insides, plus 16. Step 4, combine your like terms. You don't need to make that a step, just make sure you do it if you don't want to write that down. 5x plus 4 equals x plus there's 8 square roots of x plus 16. Step 5, you see how you still have this square root left? That means you have to isolate. Isolate square root. And that came from the beginning of the lesson when I told you your main idea is to isolate your radical. If possible, always isolate your radical. I'm going to isolate my radical. I need to take away x and I need to take away 16 on both sides. So that's going to give me 4x minus 12 equals 8 square roots of x. At this point, if you want to divide by 4, since everything does divide by 4, you may. I'm not quite sure if you do that on your own though, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, so step 6, square both sides again. Now this side is going to be a little more difficult to square because it's a binomial. This side's not going to be hard, you're just going to get 64x. When I square this side, I get 4x minus 12 and another 4x minus 12 that we're going to have to FOIL. Okay, so 4x times 4x is 16x squared. 4x times negative 12 is minus 48x, minus 48x again, plus 144. And that just comes from multiplying your binomials together. That equals 64x. Step 7. You see how you have an x squared? You got to set it equal to 0 then. Alright, so I'm going to bring this 64 over. So I'm going to minus 64 from both sides. Okay, so minus 64x here. Now remember, when you take 64 away, all of these items have to get put together. All of the regular x's, okay? So you have negative 48, you have another minus 48, and now you have your minus 64, so we have minus 160x. So 16x squared minus 160x plus 144 equals 0. Now if we go back up here, this would be a pain to factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go way up, and I'm going to divide everything by 16 because it's going to make it easier. So write divide by 16 to make easier. Okay, so it gives me x squared minus 10x plus 9 equals 0. Okay, all I did is I divided everything by 16. Step 9, I need to factor. If I can. If I can't factor, I need to use the quadratic formula, so let's put that on there. Or the quadratic formula. This one does factor nicely to minus 1 and minus 9. Step 10 is to solve. X minus 1 equals 0. X minus 9 equals 0. So x equals 1 and x equals 9. Now we've got to check these to see if they are both solutions. So we'll do the square root of 5 times, let's check 1 first. And I'm just getting this equation from the very top. Minus the square root of 1, let's see if that equals 4. Well, this turns into the square root of 9 minus the square root of 1. That turns into 3 minus 1. So, does 3 minus 1 equal 4? No. 1 is not a solution. So let's check 9. So I do the square root of 5 times 9 plus 4. Then I have to subtract the square root of 9, and we're going to see if that equals 4. 5 times 9 is 45, plus 4 is the square root of 49, minus the square root of 9. That's really 7 minus 3. 7 minus 3 equal 4? Yes. X does equal 9.